The RUKN street gang faced criminal charges tonight. Arrests came at dawn this morning as federal agents and local police teamed up in raids on two RUKN buildings.
Channel 5's Carol Marine, who was there for the morning raids, tells us what police uncovered. Carol?
Mary and Ron, in twin early morning assaults, agents of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, gang crimes officers, plus state police and the F.B.I. all converged on the RUKN street gang, arresting 3 alleged members and confiscating a military type of weapon and narcotics paraphernalia. Target 1, the fort, the RUKN headquarters for a dozen years at 39th and Drexel. The ATF, along with other federal, city, and state law enforcement agents, hammered and cut and sawed their way into the fortified old building, which was once the Oakland Theater. The second target today, an apartment building at 6416 South Kenwood, believed to be one of the RUKN's numerous property holdings. Arrested were 35-year-old Alan Knox, otherwise known as Gangster, a reputed RUKN general, and Trammell Davis, an alleged general often used as a look-alike for imprisoned RUKN leader Jeff Fort. Knox was charged with attempting to receive an M72 law rocket. This is what a law rocket looks like. It is a military, handheld rocket used to fire at tanks. U.S. Attorney Anton Valukas would only give sketchy details about the arrest and the rocket at an afternoon news conference.
Knox was arrested in connection with his attempt to receive an interstate shipment, an M72 light anti-tank weapon for purposes of destroying a building. Davis was arrested in connection with a search being conducted at the 6416 South Kenwood address in connection with the same investigation. At the time that these arrests and search were being made, let me make this one statement parenthetically, weapons were recovered in those searches so far.
In addition to weapons, which appear to be the main priority today, drug paraphernalia, scales, and records of alleged transactions all were part of the search of RUKN property. Authorities are remaining closed-mouthed about their third arrest and thus far have not released that person's identity. Their biggest concern, why would a Chicago street gang be in the market for a light anti-tank missile? Tonight at 6, I'll have an exclusive report on what federal authorities theorize the RUKNs are up to. Ron and Mary, it may surprise you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Carol.
Good evening. Has the RUKN street gang forged a link to international terrorist organizations? Incredible as that may sound to some, today's raid of 2 alleged RUKN headquarters raises new concerns for law enforcement. We have exclusive details. That's because in the process of raiding and ripping apart storage areas at the RUKN so-called fort here at 39th and Drexel, and at one of their alleged apartment buildings here at 64th and Kenwood, agents of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, gang crimes officers, and other local, state, and federal authorities not only turned up what appeared to be an anti-tank rocket and launcher similar in construction to this law missile, but authorities, according to highly placed sources, now have information that the RUKNs have been making contacts with radical Muslim groups in the Middle East. Authorities are looking into allegations that those contacts include Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. But U.S. Attorney Anton Valukas would have no comment when asked about such reports, and at a press conference today would only read a prepared statement about 2 alleged RUKNs who were arrested today, reported generals Alan Knox and Trammell Davis.
Knox was arrested in connection with his attempt to receive an interstate shipment, an M72 light anti-tank weapon for purposes of destroying a building. Davis was arrested in connection with a search being conducted at the 6416 South Kenwood address in connection with the same investigation.
In recent months, the RUKNs have changed the name on the masthead of their headquarters to include Sunni Muslim, arguing they always were and always will be a religious organization, not a gang. The Malik that appears under the name Muslim refers to Jeff Fort, the leader of the gang who authorities say is still running this organization from a Texas federal prison.
Libya's Muammar Gaddafi is a Sunni Muslim. According to highly placed sources, the RUKNs have attempted to sell their services to Gaddafi in exchange for financial support. Authorities add that information to other information they've acquired over the years, including the fact that when Jeff Fort several years ago attempted to flee federal custody, federal authorities found he had made plans to try and escape to Pakistan. And exiled RUKN General Derek Porter a couple of years ago was tracked by federal agents traveling in the Middle East. And law enforcement confirms a relationship between the El RUKNs and the Black Hebrews, a group based in Israel now in serious criminal difficulties with U.S. authorities. Today's charge of attempting to receive an anti-tank missile, coupled with new information being supplied to authorities here in Chicago, are now causing the ATF and others to give some serious consideration to whether the El RUKNs are branching out into some aspect of international weapons and terrorist business for financial gain. And there is much more to report on the El RUKNs. Tonight at 10, I'll have an exclusive report on what may be happening to imprisoned El RUKN leader Jeff Fort in the very near future.
Has the El RUKN street gang of Chicago tried to link up with international terrorists? Well, unbelievable as that may sound, as Carol reported exclusively at 6 tonight, federal authorities are investigating just that possibility. And tonight, Carol tells us that's not all they're investigating.
No, Ron, it's not. Authorities are also making a careful study of Jeff Fort, the leader of the El RUKNs. They say just because he's been sent away to a Texas federal prison doesn't mean he's out of circulation. Fort's headquarters and an El RUKN apartment building were both raided on the south side today by a variety of law enforcement officials, ATF, the Marshal's Office, gang crimes officers, the FBI. Drug paraphernalia was confiscated from the first location. More surprisingly, a major piece of military hardware, an anti-tank missile and launcher like the one you see here, was taken from the second location. Authorities believe that even though Jeff Fort left Chicago several years ago to do time in a federal Texas prison, that the current activities of this street gang are being directed by Fort himself. Channel 5 News has learned that investigators are preparing to slap Jeff Fort with new federal racketeering charges. According to highly reliable sources, those charges are based on long-distance phone taps, conversations between Jeff Fort and gang members back here at home, conversations in which Fort allegedly is running the gang's criminal activity here in Chicago.
We're not a gang.
But for years now, the El RUKNs have steadfastly denied that they are a criminal activity, saying they are simply a Muslim religion.
We only are involved with the uplifting and the building of our people in our society, building better neighborhoods and better communities.
But sources say evidence currently exists that shows a number of things, including that Fort and his organization have recently tried to move beyond the streets of Chicago, have made overtures to the government of Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, allegedly offering to commit terrorist acts inside the United States in exchange for large sums of money.
I will have no comment on any other aspect of this today. I will tomorrow.
Though the U.S. Attorney's Office won't comment on any of this, those same highly placed sources say the El RUKN's interest in acquiring anti-tank military hardware fuels their concern. As a result of today's raids and federal warrants, 2 reputed El RUKN generals were arrested. A third is still being sought, Ron.
Do we have any evidence that Colonel Gaddafi accepted any offers from the El RUKNs?
In point of fact, we don't. There is some reason to believe that Gaddafi realized that or believed that the El RUKNs were not, in fact, Muslim ideologues and did not take them up on their offer.
All right, thanks, Carol.
Channel 5 News tonight has learned new details in a strange story of the RUKN street gang making a bid to do terrorist work for Libya. Channel 5's Carol Marine first broke this story last night and now has exclusive details.
Tonight we've learned more of the specifics of where the El RUKNs traveled and what they proposed to do for the Gaddafi government in exchange for cash. When federal, state, and local law enforcement swooped down on 2 El RUKN strongholds on the south side yesterday morning, they were acting on information that made this raid different than previous drug and gun busts. In recent months, investigators began to hear things that even they had trouble believing. Information that the El RUKNs were making a pitch to do work for Colonel Gaddafi of Libya. Channel 5 News has learned that on 2 separate occasions in recent months, representatives of the El RUKNs did some serious traveling. One trip was from Chicago to Panama, where federal investigators observed a meeting between representatives of the street gang and Libyan operatives of Gaddafi. Another trip was from Chicago to the Libyan mission in New York City. Federal investigators believe the El RUKNs were proposing to blow up buildings or even a commercial jetliner in the United States for the right amount of money. and that imprisoned gang leader Jeff Fort in a federal penitentiary was directing that effort. The feds reportedly have wiretaps of Fort calling from Texas to a speakerphone at the RUKN headquarters in Chicago, advising gang members assembled there on the relative merits of military anti-tank weapons such as this Law missile. Fort reportedly discussing technical attributes of this kind of weapon, including its pop-up sights. It was the same kind of military anti-tank weapon that investigators recovered in yesterday's raid.
There is no evidence that Gaddafi's agents accepted the alleged RUKN proposal. No evidence the gang engaged in terrorist acts. The two alleged RUKN generals face a bond hearing tomorrow afternoon on drug and weapons charges.